Welcome to Financial Focus, brought to you by Gulf Coast Financial Services founder and CEO, John Kirkendall. John and his team of financial, legal, and tax professionals have been providing North Florida savers and investors sound, comprehensive financial guidance for over 30 years, helping you to achieve important life and planning goals. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and tune in for more Financial Focus by visiting gulfcoastfinancial.net.
And welcome into the program. This is Financial Focus, brought to you by the best of the best in financial services, as named by the readers of the Lake City Reporter. 7 years and running the team from Gulf Coast Financial Services, saving North Central Florida savers and investors for 30 years plus. And founder, CEO John Kirkendall here with us, providing guidance and perspective on the financial world and the complicated decisions that we need to make with our money in order to make financial progress. And John, we're glad that you can provide that clarity. We certainly need it in this complicated financial money world.
Well, it gets more and more complicated every day, Peter. It's never has been simple, but lately it's gotten very, very complicated. With inflation and taxes and all the stuff that we're facing in retirement, and also while we're working, everything is just more complicated. And what we're going to talk about today, caring for loved ones, that really is complicated because there's so many things pulling us one way and another that we really need to make sound decisions. And sometimes that's difficult based on the circumstances.
Yeah, I've often talked about with others that are kind of in my age group how expensive children are. But putting that in perspective and comparing it, the baby boomer generation is being called the sandwich generation because they're sort of caught in the middle, not only caring for and raising children and sometimes grandchildren, but also now more often and increasingly also providing for the care and the financial well-being for parents, which that can be an expensive proposition as well.
Well, that's true. The taking care of the kids is something that is always going to be there. I always call them the boomerang generation because we get rid of them and then all of a sudden they turn around and come back home. But the cost of long-term care, the cost of the care that old ones are requiring today, because we're living longer, and so we're not as in good a health, but our minds are still good, and we still have good bodies, but our parents didn't prepare for that. It wasn't something that their fathers and their grandfathers, their forefathers had to worry about. So they didn't have the money, the wherewithal, and so they never planned for it. And now we're being forced, in many cases. I have several clients I know who, they're having to give money out to take care of a parent, and then at the same time, they've got a child with children that are now having to help support them too while they get back on their feet. It's a difficult situation.
Well, and for fairness and just for the reality of it, let's not boil it down to just a financial or a money consideration. No. We want to be able to provide care for loved ones, for family members, for children, and for aging parents. But we've also got to understand all that's involved and what it takes and what those potential costs are and where we can protect our loved ones against the costs and everything that's involved. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today is how do we not only protect ourselves, but protect our family, our loved ones from the expenses of that care and everything that goes into providing care for loved ones. So not an easy conversation, but one that is held out of necessity, John. We've got to face these realities and we've got to understand what it takes. So boiling the conversation down from that perspective, what do we need to know? What do we need to understand about all of the intricacies of providing this care for our loved ones and preventing it or protecting them against having to do it for ourselves?
Well, we just said that it's expensive. Now, there is an emotional cost and a drain on your being while you're taking care of them, but it is expensive. And because you may have to take off work, you may have to, some cases, people have quit work in order to take care of their parents. So, life insurance, the proper amount of life insurance has always been a great way to care for loved ones and our families. And it's also a great way to save tax-free for retirement. So life insurance, the proper amount of life insurance. And, a lot of people wonder, well, how do I calculate the right amount? I got $100,000. Is that really enough? Well, I don't know. It depends on how much debt you got, how many young kids you've got at home, and other circumstances that we have to look at. So life insurance is certainly one. Savings, we need to have the proper amount of savings. And, I always like that Dave Ramsey said to start off, saving for $1,000. And then after you did that, then save for 6 months worth of living expenses. And I've always said, as long as I've been in financial planning, that we need to have at least 6 months to a year of living expenses saved in an account that I can get my hands on without penalties, without losing principal, that is actually liquid so that I can get a hold of it. We never know when we're not going to be able to work, when we're not going to be able to continue to do things we do. And so we need to be prepared for that. I think those are two of the best ways. And then as we get into appropriate investing a little bit later, but certainly life insurance and the right amount of savings and the right amount of debt.
Well, the appropriate investing, I think you answered the immediate question that came to mind, which is, well, then how do we fill that donut hole? Because if we've got the emergency account, the savings on the front end, that may last us for 6 months to a year. If we've got some immediate expenses, life insurance is a good protection because it can serve to refill any buckets we've had to drain down after we go. But in that middle period, John, that's really where we've got to figure out how to cover these expenses. And I know that there are some aspects of life insurance that don't just make it a replenishing tool, that we can actually use that along the way too. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as having well-funded investments to help cover those costs in the donut hole.
Well, that's right, Peter. We need to make sure that we're properly investing, that we have the right mix, and how we look at things. But we need to help ourselves first before we help others. I mean, I think you said the analogy of the stewardess as you're flying in the airplane. They always say that in the event of an emergency and the mask falls from the ceiling, put yours on first, and then put the kids on. So we need to take care of ourselves first and make sure that we have a proper safety net and a way to take care of ourselves during these times that we need extra money for our loved ones.
Yeah, they don't follow that up with, because you're selfish individuals and care nothing about your children. It is for the protection and safety of others that you stabilize yourself first and get that own mask on. And for the analogy, for the comparison, financially, we need to be taking the same approach as well. Of course, we want to serve our best to protect others and those around us and our loved ones. But I think your point is very appropriate, that we need to be making sure that we're not putting others in danger or becoming a burden on them as best as possible as well. And probably first and foremost, that's the primary thing we need to be doing.
Well, the last thing that anybody that I talk to wants to do when they get old is have to borrow money from the kids.
Become dependent.
They may not have it. Or they don't want to go live with them because, their lifestyles are different. And it just doesn't give them the peace of mind. I had that talk this week with one of my clients who has a daughter and 2 grandkids that have come back, and she's trying to help them. But at the same time, like I explained to her, we can do all this and we can continue to help them. But what expense, what does it do to your retirement? What does it do to you're 70 something years old. You don't need to be giving out, 50, 60, 70,000 a year of your money that you save to support your daughter. Somehow we got to play tough love. That's a hard one, though. I find for a lot of clients, that's a hard one to say no to kids.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, I'm a parent myself. I do anything for my son,
Yeah.
but at a certain point in time, doing the best thing for myself is doing the best thing for my son because A, lead by example, B, helping to prevent me becoming dependent on my son during his peak earning years. So,
Well, there's not only that, Peter, but there's going to come a point in time when you're not going to be there.
right.
And if they're used to you being the safety net, all of a sudden the net's gone.
Yep.
And they're going to fall unless we build them up. And somehow we have to get them out of the area. They build their own net. Like we were talking earlier, we have to be self-sufficient first. So we build our own net and then we work from there. So they have to get out of the nest.
Well, what was once a safety net is in fact becoming the very thing that is now pulling us down in the anchor when we ourselves become dependent on our children. So during the time where we have options available to us during our earning years or in the first several years of retirement, John, I think that we need to be proactively thinking about, planning for, and addressing the possibility of care expenses, medical expenses. And I know there are a few options. In fact, now maybe more options than ever before. Maybe not a perfect option, but all of them worth considering. And we should have some type of answer in place for what is our plan, what is our approach to covering the costs of care.
Well, in Florida, Peter, long-term care insurance is non-existent. We can't go buy a typical long-term care policy because actuarially those weren't written right in the early 1900s, 2000s, and so those are gone. But what we have done is we've developed life insurance policies that have a terminal chronic illness rider on it. So if we're terminal, they'll pay a certain amount of the policy right up front so we can finalize our last wishes and at the same time pay for all of our expenses related to that illness. They have chronic critical illness, which will help pay for some of that long-term care. And then also we have these hybrid annuities that pay an income, a lifetime income, but then they'll double that lifetime income for 5 years in most cases, and then revert back to the standard income. So it's certainly not, it's not going to cover all of the expenses, but it's going to cover some of the expenses and at least take some of that burden off of your own investments.
So the traditional long-term care insurance, no longer an option, but some substitutes, some alternatives, and some viable options do still exist. Why are these attractive? What are the maybe benefits and the disadvantages actually, John?
Well, the benefits are is we can take a little bit of money and we can spread it out so that we can cover not only our retirement income so that we can get that pension check each week, but it also, like I said, will give us that extra boost during our illness if we're confined at home or in a facility, and it'll pay for up to 5 years. So it takes a little bit of money to cover a major illness. And like I said, it's not going to cover all of the expense, but it will cover the majority of the expense. The thing we have to remember is that a majority of our clients are not going to qualify for Medicaid the way that it's based today. And so we're going to have to spend down our investments in order to cover those long-term care costs unless we come up with an alternative. And this is a way that we can take a few dollars, set them aside for a long-term care substitute, and at the same time still have dollars that we have invested that we can use for our day-to-day expenses and our travel money. I still am a firm believer of Tom Hagley's analogy that we have 3 phases in retirement. The go-go years when you first retire, and I'm seeing that in all my clients, the slow-go years, and I'm seeing that. And then in my dad, I saw the no-go. And so I know that at some point in time, even I am going to get to the point where I'm not going to want to leave the house as much because that's just comfortable. You got your recliner, you got your TV, you got your fridge, bathroom. What more could you want?
Yeah. You made the comment, most of your clients probably not going to qualify because they do in fact have assets. That Medicaid, that's there as a means of last resort. And the government will provide some assistance, but not if you can provide it for yourself, not if you've got assets available to pay for care. And so I guess, John, especially between married couples, this is really where this becomes important, because if it's just one individual, and to be quite frank, especially with guys, we're probably more like, well, if we have to live in a tent and eat tree bark for the rest of our lives, we can make it. But when we think about married couples, we don't want to put our spouses, either way, male or female, or however order that goes in. We don't want to put them in a less than financial situation. We don't want to burden them with impoverishment just to cover the cost of care. And that's where really careful planning, finding one of these alternatives, becomes so important.
Well, that's so, Peter. I have an experience where we did have a client who went on Medicaid. They didn't have a lot of assets, but they had a large amount of income. So he had an Army pension, a Florida State pension. He had another pension plus his Social Security. His wife had never worked that much. She had a small Social Security check. When we got through with what was getting him qualified for Medicaid, they took all of his retirements, which were over $5,000 a month. They paid the difference between the $5,000 and the $7,000 for his long-term care unit. And then they turned around and gave her back $1,000 a month to live on. So you're right. The spouse does suffer in these situations because, she ended up having to take care of the house, take care of the car payment, drive to see him on $1,800 a month.
Wow.
After they took all of his retirement pension. Now, they also required him to fund down his IRA based on his minimum distributions. So Medicaid is not the thing that we thought it was going to be. A lot of people just think, hey, I'm going to go on Medicaid and the government's going to pay for all this. They won't do it. We have to plan for how we're going to cover this.
And I've heard, John, the phrase, I'm self-insured, or I could afford to be self-insured for medical expenses or long-term care costs. If we've got sizable assets and sufficient income, we may be able to make that statement. But from the story you just shared, it may make sense, even if we've got the confidence to be able to make that statement, to take steps to protect the assets that are giving us that confidence.
Oh, that's right. I mean, what we want to do is, as long-term care costs continue to increase, and we have this inflation that's running away, you're going to see costs which are $7,000, $8,000 here be $14,000, $15,000 a month before we know it. And so we can wipe out a large amount of our assets, even if we think we're self-insured. I don't think there's any way, unless you're a multimillionaire, that you can self-insure for long-term care, because we don't know how long we're going to have it. Mm-hmm. And, if you end up with dementia, which is a long illness, a slowly progressing illness that takes a long time because our bodies are still good, it's our mind then that's gone, you can have a large amount of expense before the time that you pass away. So we can end up using a lot of our assets, or the majority of our assets, in that situation.
So, John, if we do want to be cautious, prudent, and proactive, we do want to address this issue and make sure that we're not placing burden on our family, or if we want to have conversations with our family so that that burden is not placed on us, what are the steps? What is the process? What does that conversation consist of?
Well, what we need to do is sit down and plan. First of all, we need an income plan. We need to figure out where the assets are, how much money we're going to need to live on. We're going to have to find our shortfall, and then we're going to have to make that up. Once we do that, then we can take a look at the assets, and we can invest the assets so that they are conservative. But at the same time, we have to take some amount of risk. We can't just not have the money sitting in a money market account. We have to be invested. We have to try to have some kind of growth. in order to grow our money during retirement. We're happy to do that, but the income plan, as I've always said, is the first key to everything. We can't go anywhere unless we know how much money we're going to need and what our shortfalls are now, so that we can try to plan on how we're going to take those up in the future. I don't see any other way, Peter.
Well, we've talked about the fact that everybody leaves a legacy. It may be positive, it may be negative, but everybody leaves some legacy behind, financial or mental and emotional, either side of that. But if we want that to be a positive impact on our loved ones, the key, the answer, John, it sounds like is planning proactively and having these conversations early and often with our planner to address the potential costs of care and to make sure that we are protecting our loved ones.
And look at the legacy documents. Make sure that our wills, our trusts, whatever we have, our power of attorneys, make sure all those are in place. They're ready to go. If any illness arises or any problems, we're covered and we're ready to move forward. I can tell you from my own dad that when he was in hospice, the hardest thing for us to do was concentrate about all this other stuff, because we were so concerned about pulling him, not being in pain, trying to get him to eat, trying to understand what he was going through. And, now that I'm a lot older than when he passed away, I understand it better. But that emotional drain, it's not the time to be worried about all the legacy documents. Where's my will? Where's my power of attorney? How am I going to handle this? How am I going to pay for it? I need to have all that figured out ahead of time. And I like to I'm telling my clients now that we need to pre-plan our burial. We need to go ahead and get that out of the way, have that cost covered, have it set up, prepay it now, and get it in today's dollars instead of tomorrow's dollars.
Great reminder there. And final part of the conversation is having those preparations taken care of, the legal documents, the final expenses, all of those kind of things. John, without those, there's really nothing that can create more disruptions and disagreements within a family, even with an otherwise pretty good financial picture. If you have not taken care of those legal documents, it can create some disruptions and disputes in a family pretty quickly, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately it does. I mean, there's enough turmoil and controversy at that point in time, and heartache at that point in time, without having it, added to, because you end up with siblings fighting over. In one case, it was jelly jars here. I think I said that one time before. They were Mickey Mouse jelly jars. One brother wanted them. The other brother wanted to keep them. The mother didn't specify. So it ended up, they almost went to court over these jelly jars because it was just so stupid. But to them, it was a big thing. So
emotions running high at those times.
Got to cover all of that stuff ahead of time. Make sure everybody understands what they're going to get. I've seen a lot of extra money thrown at funerals that didn't need to be thrown at funerals just because of the heartache and the perception at the time, when if the individual had sat down and said, this is what I want to do, this is what I want, and this is what it is, it would have been so much simpler on the loved ones.
And these are conversations that you can help your clients through there at Gulf Coast Financial Services.
We have experienced it, Peter. We've gone through it with multiple of our relatives. We know how to handle all this stuff. We love to sit down and talk with people about planning, about making sure that they are covered and that we've got everything out of the way so that the transition to the afterlife is a smooth one.
Well, let's have those conversations proactively, ladies and gentlemen. Caring for loved ones, the topic, the theme of today's program, this episode of Financial Focus. And if you want to provide that care mentally, emotionally, and financially, you've got to plan proactively. Pick up the phone, give Gulf Coast Financial Services, John Kirkendall and his team, a call at 386-755-9018. That's 386-755-9018, 386-755-9018. You can visit online, gulfcoastfinancial.net. Have these conversations and then formulate the plan and have the instructions laid out for not only the financial progress that you want to make, but for the values that you want to transcend and continue to pass and provide that care and protection for your loved ones. John, appreciate the reminder of these important topics and the discussion of why they are so important.
Well, thank you, Peter. Is this our Mother's Day edition?
Mother's Day edition. Yeah.
Hey, happy Mother's Day to all of y'all out there. Yeah, I mean, that's the most important day of the year, Peter. We got to thank our mothers. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Our theme is always talking about caring for loved ones around Mother's Day and the financial tools around Father's Day. For some reason, that seems to have fallen into a pattern and routine, John.
Good one. Have a good week, Peter.
You as well. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And John, always appreciate the time and guidance and insight information that you share here.
Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and tune in for more financial focus by visiting GulfCoastFinancial.net. The information presented on this program is provided for informational purposes only, without warranty of accuracy, completeness, or suitability for a particular purpose. This program is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. This information is general in nature and not specific enough to be construed as advice. You should not make any decision based on the information presented on this program without independent consultation with an appropriately licensed professional or competent advisor. Investment in securities or the market involves a potential risk for loss of principal. Trading, therefore, may not be suitable for all listeners. Annuity guarantees are based solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals of growth from annuities may be taxable as ordinary income in the year it is taken. Individuals should review contracts for specific details of the product's features and costs. Early withdrawals may subject the owner to penalties, fees, or taxes. John Kirkendall is registered with and securities are offered through Kovac Securities Inc., member FINRA SIPC, found online at www.kovacsecurities.com. Advisory services are offered through Gulf Coast Financial Services Inc., a registered investment advisor in Florida. Gulf Coast Financial Services Inc. is not affiliated with Kovac Securities Inc. or Kovac Advisors Inc. Past performance is not indicative of future results. All investing involves risk. Investment decisions should be based on your own goals, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Due to various factors including changing market conditions and/or applicable laws, the content may no longer be reflective of current opinions or positions.